Candidate Michael Bloomberg unveiling his tax plan. It aims to raise $5 trillion and would likely increase his own tax bill. Robert Frank is back with those details for us.
Well, Kelly, it is a $5 trillion plan, and it's more than 50% higher than Joe Biden's, but less than a quarter of the size of that of Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders. Now, it has three basic parts. First, he would hike the top income tax rate to 44.6%. That's for income over $5 million. He would raise the corporate tax rate from 21% to 28%. And this is the biggest change. He would tax capital gains the same as ordinary income for those making more than $1 million, which means that if you have a capital gain, that's you sell an asset, a stock, a house, or a company, the top rate would go from 20% to 44.6%. If you're in California and New York, that rate would be over 56%. Now, he also would end the step up in basis. That's when unrealized gains go untaxed after you die. He would also broaden the estate tax to apply to more Americans, and he would get rid of carried interest, which lots of people have said they would get rid of, but nobody has.
The carried interest being aimed at the private equity industry,
Correct.
Among others. And,
yeah.
Robert, stay with us. Let's drill down a little bit more on Bloomberg's plan and how it stacks up against other proposals. Ben White is here. He's chief economic correspondent in Politico and a CNBC contributor. Welcome, sir.
Welcome back, Kelly.
Thank you. So the interesting thing about Mike Bloomberg's plan is that he doesn't have the big headline-raising plans of what to spend the money on, does he? I mean, what is his, putting aside what the impact of some of this, like the 56% rate on some capital gains,
Sure.
What does he want to do with the $5 trillion?
Right. Well, he's talked about infrastructure, he's talked about education, he's talked about healthcare to some degree, though not Medicare for all. He wants to do a lot of different things to kind
environmental
of
programs.
I'm sure there'd be some, gun buybacks and gun violence stuff because that's a big issue for him. So he does want to raise revenue. I think a lot of this is you cannot be a candidate for the Democratic nomination without having a wealth increase, a tax increase on the wealthy. Now, he doesn't do a wealth tax like Sanders and Warren do,
right,
which would try to assess all assets in a very difficult way. But if you want to get the nomination, you have to be in the game of I'm for raising taxes on the wealthy.
The irony, Robert, as has been pointed out, is that this would seem like such an extreme move if it weren't in comparison to Medicare for all,
Precisely.
Green New Deal, and the things that cost multiple trillions.
If a Democratic candidate had put out this plan 4 years ago, 8 years ago, where you're calling for a 10% increase in government spending, $5 trillion in additional spending, where the capital gains rate, which has been sacred for the Republican Party and for many of the Democrats for ages, had come out with this, they would call it socialism.
Right.
But in this context, where we're talking about people who want a wealth tax, which Bloomberg says is unconstitutional, he would also have to pay a lot of money for it, it suddenly looks moderate.
Yeah.
And by any other election cycle, it's not.
Yeah, and I think it makes things complicated for Biden here, which is the real Bloomberg story, is what is his impact on Biden going forward? He's now essentially Bloomberg's a little bit to the right of Warren and Sanders, but now a little bit to the left of Biden. Gets into the Super Tuesday states. He would naturally take votes away from a centrist like Joe Biden. Does that mean more gravitate to Sanders and Warren?
When we had Howard Schultz toying
Right.
with the idea of running, people said, you're going to be a spoiler, you're going to ruin it for the Democratic Party, and he basically ended up saying, forget it, I'm out.
Yeah.
Why aren't people treating Bloomberg the same way, as a spoiler for the traditional candidates who is buying his way into the election and making some of their sort of core beliefs look hypocritical?
Yeah, I think some of them are treating him that way and are worried about him being a spoiler particularly for somebody like Biden. I mean, there is a lot of nervousness in the Democratic Party, particularly we're on the Iowa caucus day.
Sure.
And
But
Bernie Sanders
was he thinking of running as an independent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that's where it pulls away. It's
But
one thing
meaning
to
they-
have a Schultz-type guy in the tent
Right.
where you're getting those votes. Another thing to say, look, the only people you detract from would be
here's
the
my point.
party.
Only if Bloomberg wins, right? If it's Iowa or in the run-up, if he and Biden split the centrist vote
Exactly.
so that a Bernie Sanders, for example,
Precisely.
becomes
that's where
the
spoiler
candidate.
factor comes in.
That's
Yeah,
right.
And
it's
again,
not
if
a general
that's what
election
voters want,
spoiler.
that's what voters want. But
Sure.
if they partition off what voters want just enough, does it actually create, the outcome that they
Right, and
they
remember, before Bloomberg entered, his people said the only way he enters is if Biden drops out
Right.
or looks
That's right.
like it's not going to happen.
Right.
And yet, Biden's still in the lead in all the polls, and Bloomberg has joined. So my question is, what
Why?
calculus changed there, or did ego take over?
I think ego took over. I think the idea that, he has a ton of money that he'd like to spend and the message that he'd like to get out. And
Yep.
I do think that He maybe ultimately thinks he doesn't get this nomination. Maybe somebody like Biden does. And then he has a huge arsenal to go after President Donald Trump in the general election to assist in the Democratic nominee. But problem is, in the process, he may wind up making the Democratic nominee somebody he doesn't want.
Exactly.
One thing we know, he won't win today.
Well,
in Iowa.
Not being on the ballot makes it a little difficult to win. Yeah.
Guys,